fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to Stateside Footy. Of course, I'm your host, Steve Silver, I figured a Monday night show to talk a little bit about the U.S. men's national team, and Zavier Gozo would be it seems like it's the right flavor tonight because there's been a lot of talk about the young American prospect from Real Salt Lake. And so I figured, why not? Let's go ahead and get into it because me personally, I think everything has been an overreaction to the March window and the lack of results and the lack of consistency in getting bodied by Belgium and Portugal. So I figured, let's go ahead and set the record straight because there's a lot to talk about. Before we get into it, though, please do me a favor and make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and also hit the notification bell as well, too, so you don't miss out on any upcoming Stateside Footy. I do want to say what's up to all the homies that are tuning in on TikTok Live and, of course, all the homies that are watching from X. And, of course, here on YouTube as well. I want to say a big hello to everybody out there. I hope you guys enjoyed your Easter holiday. Let's go ahead and get into it. Quickly, Nateski75, he says, what's going on, Footy? RIFCTID, Rhode Island FC. And of course, man, I'm a man of my word, and I will be doing a USL live stream featuring Nateski's Rhode Island FC because that's just what I do. Greg 1987 is in the chat this evening. He says, good evening, Greg. I hope you had a good Easter Sunday yourself. So much has happened today. Hopefully Aubameyang injury, not that serious. And of course, we're going to get into it. And that's exactly where we're going to start. Because Patrick Aubameyang was carted off today in Derby County's match today. And what has been described as an Achilles injury. And of course, Aubameyang will have a scan. And so we will, as soon as that scan comes to fruition, we'll find out the severity of the Achilles injury, or even if it is an Achilles injury, if it's maybe a ligament tear within the ankle, whatever the case may be, we are going to find out about it sooner rather than later. And this couldn't have come at a worse time for head coach Mauricio Pochettino, because as everybody knows, Pat is Pochettino's guy. And of course, if you guys have been following the U.S. men's national team for more than 6 months, it was January of 2025 where Aubameyang kind of hit the scene for the U.S. men's national team, getting called into that Camp Cupcake. And of course, he made a very good impression on Pochettino. And from that point in time, Aubameyang has essentially been a part of every single camp. The skill set had improved over the course of 2025, where because of the profile of the national team, he was able to make that move over to the championship. And as soon as Aubameyang started getting regular playing time over there, he took advantage of it to the point where he started even surpassing my expectations of what I thought Aubameyang was going to be, and he quickly improved to a point where he surpassed some of his counterparts with the U.S. men's national team, and now all of a sudden his World Cup 2026 is now in jeopardy, which means that Ricardo Pepi becomes that much more important for the U.S. men's national team. It also means that Haji Wright becomes that much more important to me and into the national team. And believe it or not, it also means Josh Sargent becomes important in this conversation. Now, I know a lot of people will poo-poo the idea of a guy like Josh Sargent, but that being said, it's like, listen, when you talk about U.S. men's national team strikers, let's understand that he was on the 2022 World Cup team, so there is that experience. And when you look at his club form over the course of the last 3.5 years, he has been one of the championship's most consistent strikers when it comes to goals scored. And from that standpoint, you can't necessarily poo-poo the idea. Now, I understand that, Sargent hasn't scored for the national team in quite some time. Jesus Christ, Fabian, what are you rambling on about here now? Oh, dude, this is not by the way, man, this is absolutely not the podcast to be talking about this, man. That's for somebody that, yeah, whatever, man. You're off on a different journey, my friend. But that being said, you can't not have that discussion without talking about him. And of course, Josh Sargent scored his first goal for Toronto FC in Major League Soccer. Now, by far, by no means am I advocating I'm not advocating for a guy like Josh Sargent. That's not exactly what I'm doing. What I'm saying is that he's going to be in the conversation because of the experience and because of the fact that he is a very good goal scorer for a club. That is going to be taken into consideration. Now, the problem with this is the fact that, he missed Gold Cup last year. And he's paid the price for not going to Gold Cup where he probably should have been. It's the same thing with Yunus Musa, really, when it comes down to it. There was an opportunity for both of those guys to solidify themselves. When I think Sargent came into the September camp and again didn't show any type of form, and that pretty much was the end of that for that. But that being said, we will find out more about Aubameyang's injury, and I think at that stage, we will know whether or not he's going to be a part of the World Cup roster for World Cup 2026. But that being said, like if you guys have been paying attention, right, Flo Balogun is still absolutely on fire with AS Monaco. And of course, all you have to do is take a look at USMNT Twitter and you'll see the goal that he scored. And you can understand exactly why most U.S. men's national team just figured that this is going to be a Flo Balogun summer. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but that being said, it's this is going to be I guess you can say a cumulative effort when it comes to the striker pool, because it's not going to be about one guy. It's going to be about multiple guys being able to facilitate, being able to score goals, which is where I actually believe that Ricardo Pepi comes into a massive play this summer. Coming off the bench, but I digress. So let's go ahead and move on from this one. Pat, I actually hope that you whatever the injury is, I hope you recover quick. And if you do miss World Cup 2026, fear not, because 2030 is around the corner. All right. So let's go ahead and move on, because as the title suggests, is Zavier Gozo ready for a U.S. men's national team call-up ahead of World Cup 2026. And I got to be honest with you guys, this is just an emotional reaction. I see it all the time on USMNT social media. And of course, there is a lot of Major League Soccer hate. And a lot of it comes from fans that probably weren't around prior to 2010, right? So you're talking about young kids that just have these, preconceived notions about Major League Soccer. There's a lot not to like about Major League Soccer. Me personally, there's a few things that I absolutely dislike about Major League Soccer, but the reality is that national teams, whether you agree with this or not, they're not all-star teams. It's not like the Pro Bowl in the NFL or the NBA All-Star team or the NHL All-Star teams or whatever the case may be, where you can just have the best players, put them on one team, and then there's your World Cup squad. That's not how it works. When a coach comes along and they have a specific philosophy and they have specific tactics of moving the ball up the pitch or whatever the case may be, there's a certain skill set that is required at every single position. And I'll tell you what, just because you play in Europe doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a type A to fill out that position, because there might be somebody in Major League Soccer that might be a better passer than you, or that might be a better defender, or just has better positioning skills to man that position. And so you'll see certain guys being called into the national team and get minutes over guys that play in Europe. And it has nothing to do with the fact that one guy is facing better competition. It's just dude has a specific skill set. But I say all that because the U.S. men's national team got bodied in March, giving up 7 goals in 2 games to Belgium and Portugal. And if you take it for face value on social media, you will see that most everybody just assumes that it was because, of Major League Soccer players getting too many minutes and not enough minutes for players who play in Europe. And I wish it were that simple. I really wish it were that simple, but it's not. Because the reality is the U.S. men's national team were not prepared to play Belgium. They really weren't. Let's be perfectly honest, right? We live in a post-Nations League society in CONCACAF where the powers that be at FIFA decided what the U.S. men's national team and what the Mexican Federation and the Canadian Football Association figured that what we needed was more CONCACAF football. And so they created the Nations League. And essentially what that did was it made it virtually impossible for most of these federations to schedule games outside of their confederation. And so what we have are schedules that are packed full of Panama, Canada, Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Jamaica, whatever the case may be. And so on a year in and year out basis, there really isn't a lot of opportunities to travel. And what's unfortunate about it is this national team, you learn nothing from beating the shit out of Jamaica or Guatemala or name your CONCACAF team. This team learns absolutely nothing by playing it. And because we play a lot of CONCACAF football, the players come into camp not even motivated because they played Panama 5 times in a year and a half. And so when it comes to these type of matches, like I'll give you a good example, like when we faced Uruguay last fall, that was the first time we actually played essentially a top 15 FIFA, a FIFA opponent since the last time we faced them, which was in the Copa America 2024. Outside of that, we really haven't faced, I know we faced Japan and South Korea, but, really for the most part, our schedule is jam-packed full of CONCACAF nations that, for the most part, when we run up against a team like Belgium, we're just unprepared for the speed and physicality in what it takes to actually compete against these teams. And so when we have these type of results, all of a sudden, everybody's quick to point and say, okay, well, what was the reason why? Why did we lose? And it's like, dude, the answer is so goddamn obvious, but no, like, it's just so convenient just to be like, MLS guys are the reason why. And it's like, dude, you're an idiot. That's not the reason why. Now, don't get me wrong. It didn't help that Max Arfson had a bad game. Yeah, like you can point to individual performances and be like, yeah, okay, but by the time some of these players came in, the game was already over. Like Pochettino waved the white flag and started giving out minutes because the game was already gone. But in the aftermath, a lot of fans were saying, why not Zavier Gozo of Real Salt Lake? Why? Why not him instead of a guy like Sebastian Berhalter or Christian Roldan or Max Arfston? And it's like, listen, man, listen. First and foremost, understand that Gozo has had a good start to the season. There's no, like, when you see some of the highlights, you're kind of like, oh, that's kind of impressive. Never mind the fact that he's only scored twice this season. 2 goals this season against 2 defenses that are horrible. Atlanta United and Sporting Kansas City. 2 of the worst defenses in the league. But here's the thing. Let's go ahead and do this, because in 2026, he's only played 540 minutes. Okay. 540 minutes, 2 goals, 2 assists. Not bad. Last season, across all competitions, he had 2,202 minutes. 4 goals, 3 assists across all competitions. Okay. Really, you're looking at 6 goals, 6 assists, 5 assists in just a little over a full season worth of football. Okay. And by the way, he also competed for the youth national team. The youth national team at the U20 level, 751 minutes between 2015 and 2015-ish and 2015 and 2017. You guys can correct me on the dates here, but and this was spread across the U20 CONCACAF championships, the U20 friendlies, and also the U20 World Cup. 751 minutes, 3 goals, 4 assists with the youth national team. And then when he was at the U15 level, between the U15 and the U19 levels, he played 10 games and only scored twice. And again, here's the thing. And by the way, when I'm saying this, I'm not saying that he's a bad prospect. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he hasn't necessarily had the most prolific youth national team career up to this date. And really, since he's been in Major League Soccer, yes, he's had moments, but he's not a finished product. That's what I'm trying to paint out for. And the reality is, compared to some of the other kids that made their U.S. senior national team debut, and we're going to get into them because I will give you a comparison with 2 of the best that made their senior national team debut at an early age. The reality is that Gozo is not a finished product, not by any stretch of the means. And one of the things that you absolutely cannot do is put a young kid in a position that he's not ready for, because we've already done that once in a young kid named Freddie Adu when he wasn't ready for it, and he never really recovered from from that, because he was not responsible enough to handle that responsibility. It was almost like a deer in the headlight type of situation. Granted, it was a different time, but still the same kind of applies. Really, what you want to do with young players is you want to let them develop. And the reality is I understand the sentiment of some fans, because when you see these type of results, you get frustrated, you get emotional, and you're starting to search for answers. But this is not the answer, right? Because the way that I look at this is that, and Greg here in the chat says it perfectly. It's like, yeah, Gozo looked great and Julian Hall is on fire, and the future is definitely hopeful. And it's like, that's absolutely right. Because what you really want to do is allow these kids to have a couple seasons in Major League Soccer, because you want to see if they fail. You want to see them handle adversity. You want to see how they respond. When defenses start keying in them, trying to mark them off the pitch, you want to see how they respond. Like, failure is a good thing for young prospects because it only makes them better. And by no means is Gozo a finished product, right? Like, bringing Gozo to the World Cup is not going to it's not going to add an extra dimension for this for this national team that people think, because like he shows creativity against Atlanta United and supporting Kansas City. It's like, okay, cool. What's he going to do against France? What's he going to do against Spain? Probably nothing. Probably nothing. And, because he's not ready to handle that type of level of competition, you probably ruin the kid's confidence. And that's not something that's not exactly something you want to do with a young kid. So instead of having this knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh yeah, let's just throw him onto the World Cup roster, it's like, why don't we pump the brakes and actually critically think this one out? Because I think that would be the worst thing that Mauricio Pochettino could do at this stage. Not to mention the fact that, we actually have a roster that's capable enough. And oh, by the way, it's actually perfectly okay to have these type of losses, because it shows you exactly where you need to correct. Like, people think that these are like demoralizing losses, and it's like, no, these actually are very good losses, because now you know for a fact where you need to improve and what you cannot do against these type of teams, right, moving forward. And so it's funny when I look at it, but I figured we needed to slow our roll down, because again, putting a guy like Gozo on the World Cup roster does absolutely nothing for this team. But I mentioned earlier a couple comparisons, right? And maybe these are unfair comparisons, but it shows you the difference between a guy like Gozo and two of these other guys who were finished products by the time that they were 17, 18 years old. And we're going to start with one of our best produced players in national team history, and that's Landon Donovan. Landon was an interesting case because at the U17 level, okay, he played in 41 games, and this wasn't just the U17 championships in New Zealand. This was it was tournaments in Europe, playing against some of the best youth national teams in Europe. It was also in tournaments in South America, playing against Argentina and Brazil and some of those countries at that level, on top of CONCACAF championships and things like that. 41 games played for Donovan at the U17 level, 35 goals scored at the U17 level. At the U23 level, he played 15 games, and of course, this was Olympic qualifying through the CONCACAF region, and of course, the Olympic tournament. 15 games, 9 goals scored. And then, of course, he gets called up at age 18, and he makes his debut against Mexico at the LA Coliseum, scores in his debut, and of course, the rest is history. And by the way, after the U17 championship, he signs his contract with Bayer Leverkusen, and in the third tier of German football, playing for the Bayer Leverkusen, I think it was the U20s in the third tier. He only played 1,209 minutes, which is he played in 20 games, and he scored 6 goals before ultimately getting his loan move to the San Jose Earthquake. And of course, he takes off in Major League Soccer, and of course, he is the tied for the lead in most goals all time for a U.S. men's national team player, a decorated youth. And by the time that he hit the U.S. men's national team roster at 18, this kid was an absolute complete package. And that showed because, that being said, a guy like Bruce Arena wouldn't have called him up if he didn't feel like he was ready to handle that responsibility. And sure enough, the rest is history, right? Christian Pulisic. And maybe you're thinking these are unfair comparisons, but I'm just giving you an idea of when a teenager is ready for that responsibility. And he has showed that he is too good for that level. And every level that they move up, he's able to not only meet the demands of that level, but exceed them and continuing to move up. So by the time that they actually hit the senior national team level, they're ready for that challenge. And it's not going to be a sink or swim, because those teams, by the way, had very good veteran leadership on that team where those teenagers didn't have to carry the load. Whereas if a guy like Gozo goes up here, comes up to the senior national team, you're kind of wondering about the veteran leadership on this team. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm kind of a little bit a little bit leery of it. But anyways, Christian Pulisic, okay, at the U17 level, and of course this was international friendlies, the CONCACAF U17, the U17 championships, the U17 World Cup. 12 games, 913 minutes, 9 goals, 2 assists. And then at the U15 level, he played in 10 games, scored 2 goals. And somebody right here just said he had Dortmund, but he was at the U15 level first before ultimately moving over. But then he was still a part of the U17s, the US in the US youth national team, even while he was at Dortmund. But speaking of Dortmund, by the way, at the U17s, and by the way, he didn't necessarily play right away because of passport issues. And he was left to train. So at the U17 level, he only played in 8 games while he was still waiting to get his passport. And once he did, he only played in 8 games. This is crazy. 696 minutes, 6 goals, 5 assists. At the U19 level, he only played in 17 games, 1,461 minutes, 8 goals, 8 assists. And of course, he made his senior national team debut at 17 years old. And he became the youngest he became the youngest goal scorer in U.S. National team history at the time. And that's the difference, right? That's the difference between young players that have not only taken advantage of the level, but they have exceeded it to a point where that next level up, these young kids had the killer instinct to the point where they got better and ultimately became too good for that level and continue to rise. So from that standpoint, it's like, listen, is Julian Hall or Zavier Gozo like on that level? Not even remotely goddamn close. And that's the thing. It's like, if he was, by the way, I would probably co-sign it. But the reality is that he's not. And let's be perfectly honest, he hasn't really done anything in Major League Soccer to warrant it. Not really. If I'm being perfectly honest, it's not that he hasn't really done it. But that being said, his skill set is still green enough where it's like you can be misled on highlights. That's the problem that I have with this entire conversation. Is the fact that when you see a highlight, you get 10 seconds of something and it's like, oh, dude, the kid's got flair and he's got creativity. And it's like, yeah, dude, but he's doing it against shitty defenses. Let's take this in context. And then you look at some of the games that he played against teams that have a little bit better defenses and, how they set up against them. Were they specifically man marking them to take him out? And then what was his reaction? All of these different questions need to be asked. But the reality is, it's like, dude, here, like when it comes down to it, it's like the U.S. men's national team is getting absolutely nothing, would absolutely get nothing from Zavier Gozo in the 2026 World Cup. Not only when it comes to production, but let's also understand that he hasn't even been called into the senior national team. He hasn't played with any of these guys. There's no continuity. There's no chemistry. And it's expected that he's going to be the guy that is going to be that's going to solve our problems. And it's like, dude, I understand you're upset that we lost that we gave up 5 against Belgium. I get it, dude. I get it. 100%. I fucking get it. But me personally, like when I see a 3-back system with 2 10s underneath a striker, and I see Flo Balogun, Christian Pulisic, Gio Reyna, and Weston McKennie all in those central areas playing underneath. And by the way, Gio Reyna has to be a part of the equation here. That is going to pay off huge dividends in the World Cup. Like that is going to be our that is going to be our that is going to be how not only are we going to win the group, but it's how we're going to be able to advance in the knockout rounds. And it's not going to be because of a 19-year-old kid playing for Real Salt Lake that is not ready for the senior national team. And by the way, he will be eventually. He will be. Like by 2030, he'll probably have caps, and he probably should be playing overseas by that point in time. And he will be ready for the 2030 cycle and the 2034 cycle. Like he has a potential of being a multi World Cup, player for the U.S. men's national team. But for Christ's sake, man, let the kid develop. Let him develop. And when the time is right, he's going to get called in. That's it. But in the meantime, it's like, understand that there are reasons why we got bodied, and it has nothing to do with Major League Soccer players. It has nothing to do with, Pochettino's, substitution patterns. And by the way, all of that shit was planned out before the two friendlies, right? There were certain players that were not going to play extensively. Let's see, Kevin Sullivan. And by the way, Kevin Sullivan, and somebody here on TikTok is asking about Kevin Sullivan. And Sullivan, I think he just got his first assist this weekend of the season. But that being said, I think he's only 16 years old. And, Kevin, when he turns 18, he's going to Manchester City. And so from that standpoint, it's like that's another player that has a very good potential to develop in to develop into something incredibly special. And you're thinking about 2030 or potentially 2034. And it's like, yeah, we have actually some really good prospects that can potentially be available in the next cycle, but not 2026. Let's see. MLS defense is questionable. I watched Alex Freeman today, and he struggled against Girona, a team on the relegation zone. Yeah, but that being said, what's kind of funny about it is I watched a little bit of that game as well too, but Alex Freeman has barely played for Valencia. I'd start him over your boy Balogun, who stands around and does jack shit. Gozo would make Plissa. I don't think so, man. Listen, man, Colin, this is like, it's cool, man. Here's the thing, man. You have your opinions, and that's cool, man. I respect your opinions. I can disagree with it. But the idea that a 19-year-old kid that's gotten off, like, and by the way, like, he hasn't really gotten off to that great of a start. Like, if you want to talk about wingers that got off to a good start, shit, Paul Rothrock's gotten off to a hotter start than he has. He's got the highlights, and he's shown actually quite a bit when it comes to the highlights. But let's be honest, right? Like, he's taken advantage of some piss poor defenses in Major League Soccer so far this year. But again, like, that's, for me, it's not necessarily whether he can or he can't. That's, to me, that's not really the question that I have. The question that I pose to you, it's like, what's going to happen when better teams really, really game plan for the kid, and he's got to figure it out on the fly. It's something that I haven't necessarily, that question has yet to be answered because he hasn't really had a lot of time in the league. I would like to see him get like 2.5, 3 full seasons in Major League Soccer, move abroad, go up another level, and then compete at that level, and then we'll come back to it. It's like, there's no rush. That's the thing about it. It's like, why rush a kid and, open him up to situations that he may not be ready for. It doesn't make any sense. It just does not make any sense to me. I'd rather slow roll him personally, but that's just me. Let's see. MLS defenses is questionable. Yeah. Okay. Like, I'm not going to make excuses for players. If he struggled, he struggled. But that being said, Alex Freeman has, I think, this must have been his second or his third appearance for Valencia. Yeah. Let's see. I agree. We should have got with Common Bull and found a way to get in Copa Libertadores. Copa Libertadores is the South American Championship club, the club championship. But I know what you're saying. Copa America. Yeah, and by the way, that was what Jurgen Klinsmann wanted to do. Jurgen Klinsmann wanted to he wanted to leave CONCACAF. And it was because CONCACAF didn't prepare the U.S. men's national team for the World Cup. And he wanted to go to Common Bowl because of the competition. And he had a point. And he had an absolute point. And of course, that got shut down because the U.S. Soccer Federation makes a shitload of money here in the United States. By playing a lot of games in the United States, they get a they get a lot of money. They get a lot of money for it. And the reason why they don't travel to Europe is they would actually have to share it. They'd have to share the television revenue for that day. And that's what U.S. soccer doesn't want to do. I remember, the funny thing is, I remember when there was I think this might have been early 2021, actually it might have been even 2019, if I can remember correctly. This was post World Cup 2018, and the U.S., there was talks about the U.S. going over to the U.K., and they were going to play a set of friendlies against Ireland and Scotland. And the U.S. ended up backing out of it because they would have had to pay both Ireland and Scotland 50% of the television revenue from that broadcast. And so the U.S. were like, fuck all that noise. And that's one of the biggest problems with getting this team to travel, is that, you have a 50-50 dance partner when it comes to the television revenue. And the U.S. Soccer Federation just doesn't want to do it. But yeah, so what I will say is that when it comes to the likes of, a Julian Hall, who was a very promising prospect. Same thing with Kevin Sullivan. But the reality is, unless they are 100% undeniably ready for that jump, then the obvious answer is no. They do absolutely nothing for your national team. They do absolutely. And by the way, if you wanted to, the time to do it was last November or October at the end of last season. That would have been the time to get them in, to get them familiarized, not less than 90 days before the World Cup against two opponents that, you don't want to bring him into those type of environments. You would typically like to bring him into those environments that are going to be soft landing, which is why you have the Camp Cupcake, right? Which is why you have the January camp. And of course we didn't necessarily have that this year. They got rid of it in a World Cup year, which to me personally is kind of ridiculous. In a World Cup year, you got to take as many games as you possibly can. And I know a lot of people, here in the U.S. men's national team universe here on X, YouTube, whatever the case may be, think that Camp Cupcake is a waste of time. But that being said, man, in a World Cup year, man, you're able to find some diamonds in the rough, and who knows? There's been plenty of examples of MLS prospects coming into Camp Cupcake the same year of the World Cup and using that to get into the next international window and setting themselves up in a position to actually make that World Cup roster. There's been plenty of examples of that happening. And this year would have been a prime opportunity to actually bring in a Gozo if you wanted to do that 100% and see exactly what that looks like, get them their first caps, and see exactly how that would look like in a safe environment against a Venezuela or a Bolivia or something like that, against teams that aren't necessarily going to expose you for the youth that they are. But that being said, man, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this is going to play out post World Cup 2026, right? Because I think the conventional wisdom is that Pochettino is done after the World Cup. He's probably going to go back to the Premier League. I would probably, like, if I had to take an educated guess, I'd probably say Manchester United. I'm just throwing that out there, and you would expect that U.S. soccer is going to go back to the well, whether it's going to be a former player or whether it's going to be an MLS head coach. And at that standpoint, you would probably expect that first year post World Cup, you're going to see a lot of B and C side national team players, guys that are going to be making their first caps. And that's kind of when you want to bring in a Gozo and a Julian Hall and give them their first caps and see exactly how that works out. And then over the course of that first year going to that second year, because usually it's going to be mid cycle where you're going to get the Copa America again, right? You're going to get the Copa America again. And that's when you kind of blend some of these young players with some of the existing players. That's usually how it's done. Though usually, like, the first year and a half is usually the B side and the C side, and then usually as you get closer to that mid cycle major tournament, that's when the blending of the young players and the existing first team players come together, and that's usually how that World Cup roster starts. That's usually when that World Cup roster starts taking its shape ahead of 2030. Way too early speak on, but who would be your pick as Poch's predecessor? Well, who do you like, man? Steve Cherundolo. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Cherundolo. I don't know, man. Steve Dolo, he just doesn't play. He doesn't play the type of soccer that I think is. I wouldn't use the word attractive. I just don't think it's going to work on an international level. Like, for the international game, it has to be as pragmatic as it possibly can be, because at the end of the day, you're doing it for one major tournament once every 4 years. You're doing it for the World Cup. And that was my biggest problem with Greg Berhalter, because he wanted to play like Barcelona 2012 or Brazil 1970. He wanted to play this beautiful, expansive football. And it's like, dude, understand what level you're at, right? You're doing it for a tournament that is only 8 games long. And you have to score as many goals as you possibly can. And, so you want to be as pragmatic as you possibly can on the international level, which is why, you'll start seeing, the reason why certain teams are more successful than others is because they play a very pragmatic, direct game. As much as everybody wants to be Pep Guardiola or Luis Enrique, you actually have to know your pool as well too, what your pool can do and what your pool can't do. And unfortunately, our pool cannot play this expansive, high possession style game. It just doesn't necessarily work on the international level. So Cherundolo, no. Would it surprise me if they went back? Would it surprise me if U.S. soccer went back to Jesse Marsch and apologized? No. I don't think, by the way, Pellegrino Matarazzo is coming. I don't think he's coming either. And I have a feeling they're going to go back to Major League Soccer. And it could be a guy like Jim Curtin or maybe Brian Schmetzer. That would be my guess. And when it comes to that, you're going to see a lot more Major League Soccer involvement as well too with the national team, especially in that first year post World Cup. You're going to see a lot of Major League Soccer players get their first caps, the Paul Rothrock's of the world, because you're going to have to unearth that next wave of talent. And because let's be perfectly honest, right? So right now, Christian's like what, 25, 26, 27, somewhere in there, where by the time 2030 rolls around, theoretically speaking, he's going to be going on to his fourth cycle. And he's pushing 30. I think Wes at that point might be 28, 29. So you have to have that next wave of players coming through. And so, one of the things that you're going to need is a coach that is very in tune, not just with Major League Soccer, but MLS Next Pro, who's coming through the ranks at that level, which is probably why also maybe even a guy like Michael Bradley might get a call. Although some would say that might be a little too early because he's really, I think this will be like his first year at Red Bull. But it wouldn't surprise me. And then, of course, you also have to have a coach that is in tune with some of the youth that's made the jump over to Europe. And, of course, those that are playing in the Belgian Pro League and the German second division, those pros that are over there as well, too. So from that standpoint, that is going to be what I think is going to be a priority post World Cup 2026 is those next wave that are going to be 22 by the time 2030 rolls around. Yeah. So you're talking Gozo, Julian Hall, Kevin Sullivan, those guys that may or may not be ready for the first team. Let's see. Hello. Let's see. Well, Colin 11 on TikTok. I have no idea what the hell you're even talking about, my guy. Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, my guy. So anyway. I would say my choice realistically though, I would think the Federation is probably going to go the MLS route, former player or MLS route. So yeah, Steve Cherundolo's name will probably be involved. Michael Bradley, and then maybe an MLS coach. Yeah, probably a guy like I can see a guy like Brian Schmetzer getting a call as well too. But as far as like going after another big name coach, no, I can't. No, I don't think what's his name, Hervé Renard, who coaches Saudi Arabia right now. I can't see that happening. And I don't think Wilfred Nancy is also going to be in the picture either. I would probably assume that I wouldn't be surprised if he gets picked up by the LA Galaxy sooner rather than later. It's been reported he's been in LA, so we'll see exactly how that plays out. But from that standpoint, the way that I look at this is that I think this is all just a reaction to 2 bad losses in March. And I understand it too, because, we're in the final stages of putting together a World Cup roster to be competitive at a World Cup on our home soil. And when you see these type of losses, the first thing that you want to do is throw shade or throw blame. And it's a natural reaction because this happens in club football all the time. Like, trust me, dude, I'm a Spurs fan. And there's nothing worse than being a Spurs fan, because not only do we not win trophies, but when you have a bad season, we're looking for anybody to shoulder the blame instead of actually being real and just saying what it is. And the reality is that with the U.S. men's national team is that, number one, I don't think that this generation is as good as it's been advertised. It's certainly good in CONCACAF, and we've had enough practice in CONCACAF where we've won the Nations League 3 years in a row. That's fucking great. But this team certainly has not gone on to do revolutionary things. As a matter of fact, there's only been one World Cup cycle in the modern age from 1990 all the way through to 2022, where we've had one cycle where we've won one knockout game, and that was in 2002 when we beat Mexico in the round of 16, and that's been it. Every opportunity that we've had to get out of the group stage, we've gone out surprisingly quick. And this is supposed to be the generation that exceeded all expectations. And quite honestly, they didn't do anything that we hadn't done. And they actually did it in quite a way that was quite embarrassing, because we were so one-dimensional that the Netherlands knew exactly how we were going to play and what we were going to do. And they absolutely took us to task. And this 4 years has been a slow backside to the 2026. Like, we should have been apexing by Copa America 2024. Like, we should have been rounding that corner and doing better than what we did in Copa America Centenario in 2016. Like, we got to the semis of that Copa America. We lost to Argentina, but it's Argentina. And that was like Argentina before they peaked and won the World Cup. Like, we should have been at that level by 2024, like rounding the corner and being able to essentially play with anybody. And that's not even remotely the case. And a lot of people will say that Pochettino hasn't successfully, dug deeper into our pool. And it's like, yeah, but he wasn't brought in for dual nationals, and he certainly wasn't brought in for expanding the pool. He was brought in to win with this, what was considered the golden generation. That's what he was brought in to do. And if anybody says anything different, man, you're fooling yourselves. That's why he was hired, because he is considered one of the best coaches in world football right now. And we allegedly have the best pool that we've ever had, or the most talented pool that we've ever had. And so that's why he was brought in. He was not brought in to streamline the channels and pathways from the youth team to the first team. That's not why he's here. And he's not here for dual nationals. He is here to win with the likes of Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Flo Balogun. That's why he was brought in, because allegedly these guys are that good. That's why he was brought in. And we'll find out. We'll certainly find out. We'll find out, man. But to be honest with you, here's a funny thing, though. It's like, I actually had this conversation not too long ago, about 3 days ago. When a lot of people, so for me, I go back to 1988, 89. I remember I was like, 8, 9 years old when the U.S. went to Trinidad in November of 89 and qualified for Italia 90. I remember watching that show on that match on ESPN. JP Della Camera was on the call, and Paul Caligiuri hit the $1 billion goal. I saw that on TV. That was my first U.S. men's national team game. I remember it. I was like 8 years old. And I remember watching Italia 90, and it was Bruce Murray that scored one of the goal. I think he scored against Italy. And obviously that 90 team wasn't ready for the World Cup, but I remember World Cup 94. I remember World Cup 98, 02, 06, 2010, 14, 2022. And it's like, a lot of old-time U.S. men's national team fans will say that it was either 2002 or 2014 were the two best rosters that were put together from a talent standpoint and a depth standpoint of all time. 2002, 2014. Me personally, it was 2002. And the funny thing is, like, if you're looking at both of these rosters side by side, how many of our starters crack that 02 roster? And it's like maybe 4, maybe 5 at most. 4. Balogun, he cracks it, considering, outside of Brian McBride, our striker pool that year wasn't really all that great. Christian, Wes, maybe Gio, maybe Tyler Adams, maybe Chris Richards at best. And a couple of those are kind of maybes. And then the rest, probably don't. And that's kind of saying something, really, because we have the resources now where Major League Soccer generates millions upon millions. It's, soccer in this country is $1 billion industry. And the resources, the academies, we should be far and away better than where we were in 2002, 2006, 2010. We should be light years ahead of it. And there's a case that it's a little bit that it's not. And then, from like 2012, we didn't qualify for the Olympics for quite some time. And, the funny thing about it is it's like when you look at our approach to youth football with the rest of the world is that we kind of do shit ass backwards. And it is our best coaches are at the top level. And our worst coaches are at the youth level. Whereas if you go anywhere in Europe, it's like, yeah, don't get me wrong, like their first team coaches, they like most of those clubs try to put together like the best coaching staff possible for their first team. But you go to their youth teams and they literally, most clubs try to put their bet, like they try to get the best coaches at that age group for their team because developing players is a vast importance for those clubs. And so, kids come into these training facilities that are better than first team facilities in certain countries. And the coaching staffs have very, very good coaching. And that's what they like to do. They like to develop young players. And, you see it here in the United States, and some of these youth coaches are just absolute dog shit. Don't get me wrong, winning is great, but, there's a lot of programs that really don't give a shit about player development. And I've seen it on 2 different occasions in the state of Washington and here in the state of Michigan. Like it's not great, man. It's not great. And it doesn't encourage kids to actually love the sport. And it's actually kind of sad as well too, but that's a story for a different day. Wayne Bonner, 9749. What's going on, Wayne? The problem, Poch, is he's a day-to-day coach. International football doesn't provide for it. I don't know about that, man. He wouldn't, like, if he was just a day-to-day coach, he doesn't take this position. I think there was something about the U.S. that intrigued him. And I'm sure that the money also was a factor as well too. We have Dermatron. Big up, Steve. Big up, Derma. Hope you're doing well, my guy. Yeah, man. I saw the youth experience in the state of Washington with my niece, who was, by the time she was 15, she was an alternate for the U.S. Youth National Team as a 10. She was a very good player, and could have gone pro. If she wanted to go the college route, she could have gotten a scholarship. And what was interesting about it was that she grew to despise her coaches. She didn't necessarily have a life because training was 4 days a week from the ages of like 12 to 15. And then every single weekend there was some sort of tournament, but she never really got to learned how to play that position because everything was like paint by the numbers. And she grew to absolutely hate the sport of soccer. And it's a shame too, because she was a really good player. And but by the way, it was funny because that club in Western Washington, those coaches' salaries are tied to winning. Right. So player development goes out the door because if these coaches are brought in, and by the way, he wasn't really that great of a coach to begin with, but he had enough talent where if you put in a system that, even a dummy can understand, if you play to the strengths of your players, you'll score a lot of goals and you'll win tournaments. And so, yeah, your salary is tied to that. And if you win enough, you move up. And that's really what that is. A lot of these coaches are there to essentially brown nose U.S. soccer, get into the right circles, network, and then move on to something better. They're not interested in player development. And I saw that here in Michigan too with my nephew, who at the age of 10, was training 4 days a week. And then, was playing, either in league or in tournament play. And, he was an 8, but he was required to play a 6. And, He just wanted to have fun with his friends, and he quit. And now he plays baseball, and he's a very good baseball player. And it could have been he was a very skilled soccer player, but it sucks, man. It really sucks. But that is the reality about it, is you have shit coaches that are in charge of development that use this as an opportunity, as a springboard to move up. And yeah, it's a shame, man. It's a shame. But that's the reality with the U.S. system at the current moment. What puzzles me is our women's side has been elite, but our men's just not there yet. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. I'd be curious to see the difference in men's to women's coaches. Like what type of coaches are responsible for developing women, or is it just that women are a little bit better at detail, being a little bit more detail oriented, where if they're asked to paint by the numbers of a position, they'll just do it because they can do it. I don't know. Like, I don't want to get into the whole women can do certain things better than men, vice versa. I don't want to get into that, but it's funny because my ex-wife used to say that, like, certain women have a certain eye for detail, so they're able to see things a little bit more broader. That could be true. It could be true. I don't know. Also, think about this, that the U.S. dominated women's soccer in an era where there was only 3 good national teams at the time. And now women's soccer is bigger, obviously. You have more nations that are competing, and they're also developing players now, so it's a little bit better than it was back in the late 90s. Like, the U.S. dominated for quite a long time. All right, well, that's going to do it for me, guys. I'm going to take off because, I got work tomorrow, and my 5-day weekend has come to an end, unfortunately. It's unfortunate. But yeah, listen, here's the thing. As I put a bow on this, that number one, the idea that a kid like Zavier Gozo is going to be on the World Cup roster in 2026 is ridiculous. And I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction to 2 bad losses. When the reality is if this team was actually prepared to go up against a team like Belgium, if we were actually prepared, we probably wouldn't be talking this way. And what I mean by that is that this is a U.S. soccer problem, right? Where it's number one, our schedule is built around too much CONCACAF football and not enough opportunities to take this show on the road. More opportunities to play in the UK, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in South America, against teams that are night and day, that are better than us. But that being said, it's like these are the type of building block friendlies that set the tone. Because if you play these type of games and you get that type of environment, when you do go up against a team like Germany or Belgium or Portugal, or whatever the case may be, you're prepared for it because you've seen it, you've witnessed it, you've actually had that 90 minutes to run with those teams, and you've seen it. And unfortunately, playing against Jamaica 3 times a year, playing against Panama 3 times a year, that level just does not prepare you. And especially playing on U.S. soil, that does. It's getting kind of ridiculous because we don't travel, and you have to build that into your muscle memory. And because we were not prepared, these type of things tend to happen. And it has nothing to do with because Christian Roldan came on for 20 minutes or however long, or Sebastian Berhalter, or whatever the case may be. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. And from that standpoint, the reach, for me, it's a reach to sit here and think that, a young kid that has not really had a prolific youth career, that's had not really, I wouldn't say he's had a prolific start to his Major League Soccer career either. to think that a 19-year-old kid is going to solve our problems. It's like, dude, you're deluded. Imagine, that third game against Turkey, and you're asking him to, go 1v1, against a couple of their better defenders. And it's like, dude, that's not going to play. You're probably going to take, a Malik Tillman or a Gio Reyna in those situations. Not to mention we don't, typically speaking, we don't play a system that has wingers. So it's not necessarily going to work out either way. Let's see. Fix it. Let's see. It says FFFTIIXRTG1. Thoughts on Austin FC? Austin's okay, I guess. I don't know, man. I'm not a big Austin. I'm not a big Austin FC guy, but what I will say is that the idea that they went to Miami and they actually had a lead too. They were leading 2-1 in that one before coughing up the equalizer against Luis Suarez. The thing about this is, it's like, if you're gonna be that team, you got to figure out ways to hold on to that, to those type of wins, right? Like, that's the thing. It's like those, essentially coughing away points from winning positions is not how you're going to kick up the tables and put yourself in a good playoff position, let alone even advancing in the playoffs before you can even start talking about, winning MLS Cup, right? I mean, they're sitting on 6 points. They have a -2 goal differential, 1 win in 6, 3 draws. I think they've only scored 7 to the good. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, what Austin really needs is, well, number one, they can't, sorry, hold on. There we go. What Austin really need is a legit striker. They need a legit number 9, and they also need somebody to pair with them coming off the wing. That is also going to be somebody that they can rely upon. That's one of the things that they need, is just a legit 1-2 punch in their attack. But the biggest thing is they got to stop leaking goals. And that's why Austin's sitting in 11th place. And I would be surprised if Austin is going to find themselves in like in a solid playoff spot. They're going to be competing for those 2 wild card spots, because they're just not a complete team. But listen, man, the cool part about Austin is their supporters travel well, and Q2 is a really cool stadium. So, do I follow an MLS team? I do. I am from Seattle, so I am a Sounders fan, and I will be for quite some time. So, I do. I absolutely love the Sounders, and that 2016 to 2022, those 8 years were, those were absolutely phenomenal years. I think we went to 4 MLS Cup finals in 5 years, winning 2, and we also won the CONCACAF Champions League. Yeah, it was a good time to be a Sounders fan, but now that franchise has lost its way too. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I will be back, I think, on Wednesday as we do USMNT Yanks Abroad, as we recap this last weekend. I might actually even do it tomorrow. No, I'm going to do it on Wednesday. I have something I have to take care of tomorrow evening. So I will be back on Wednesday as we sign Lewandowski to MLS, Steve. I can't do that because I don't work for the league. But hopefully the league will. And by the way, man, Antoine Griezmann to Orlando City, that is a shit pile of a team, but it is what it is, man. He's going to Orlando City. But I will be back this weekend for the MLS live stream. Just out of curiosity, who is playing this weekend? Let's see. This upcoming weekend. Vancouver NYCFC looks like a good one. Inter Miami versus the Red Bulls. Charlotte versus Nashville looks pretty cool too, although I just got bit by Nashville. Let's see. San Diego versus Minnesota would be cool. But yeah, like I think, maybe Vancouver versus NYCFC Saturday, the 11th. I think that's what I'm going to do. So obviously the MLS live stream will be back. And of course, coming up this weekend from the Premier League side, Spurs versus Sunderland from the Stadium of Light. That's going to be on a Sunday morning. So that live stream will be on it as well too, but also a lot more U.S. men's national team conversations as we get set for World Cup 2026. And also a reminder that World Cup 2026 will be your home here on Stateside Footy. So please do me a favor and make sure you hit that like and subscribe buttons. I want to thank everybody that was tuning in on TikTok Live. You guys are awesome. For those that are tuning on X, I do appreciate it. And of course, if you guys could hit that like and subscribe buttons, I would appreciate it, man. You guys be awesome. Take care. Have a good week, guys. Good night.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies, tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes.